to yet another session, Saturday night chat session of Indian Occupational Therapists Think Tank. So we started this initiative a few years ago with a basic premise of everything starts with a discussion. So that's the underlying premise of this initiative. So we have completed 14 Saturday night chat sessions so far, and this is our 15th. So typically the frequency is like once every quarter, we will have a session like this on a Saturday evening, 7 p.m. Indian time. The idea is again, there are so many topics that are relevant to the Indian occupational therapy practice and education that needs to be deliberated so that we can learn from each other and also like generate new insights and move forward. Every session has a moderator who is an IOTTT member. And today we have Ms. Nidhi Daway as our moderator. And the topic that we're going to discuss is culturally relevant occupational therapy models, creating solutions that work for India. It's a I would say it's a little complicated topic with multiple layers to it, and definitely these type of topics are the ones that we need to deliberate to get different perspectives. I sincerely appreciate all of you joining here today. If you can, please feel free to put on your camera so that we can see each other. And I see some new names. So I would like to introduce myself as well as like if you all could briefly introduce yourself. Hello, Dr. George. Welcome. Good seeing you. So my name is Karthik Mani. I'm currently the president of the Indian Occupational Therapist Think Tank. I'm an assistant professor and the interim program director for the entry-level occupational therapy doctoral program at the University of Texas Medical Branch. So again, I will maybe ask Dr. George to briefly introduce herself, and then others can introduce. And finally, I will invite Nidhi to introduce herself and then get us started on the discussion. Dr. George.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. My name's Emma. I am from Adelaide in South Australia. I'll be back in India on Wednesday. I'll be in Hyderabad. I love India. I have been many, many times. I'm an OT, so I'm the head of the occupational therapy program at the University of Adelaide. I'm also a board director of OT Australia, and I'm the Australian delegate to the World Federation of OT, and I'm a friend of IOTTT. I first met many of you 2023 when I spent a month in India, and at the invitation of IOTTT got to speak at a number of universities in Chennai. So it's nice to join you this evening. It's midnight here in Australia. But...
Thank you for taking the time to
My
join
pleasure.
us. All right, may I ask Sri Ridhanya to introduce herself?
Hi everyone, is it audible?
Yeah.
Hello sir, thanks. And myself, I'm Ridhanya. I'm an occupational therapist, a fresher currently. So I'm in Bangalore. I got interested to see this, attend the webinar, sorry, through my colleague. So I'm just eager what will be happening here. Thank you for having me.
Sure. Mm-hmm. Naveen Kumar. Mr. Naveen Kumar. Okay, I think, can you hear me, Mr. Naveen Kumar? Maybe some connectivity issue because I see him twice as well. So Nidhi, yeah, please go ahead and introduce yourself and then get us started on the discussion.
Greetings, everyone. I am Nidhi. I am an occupational therapist. My primary qualification is a bachelor's degree in occupational therapy, followed by my master's in mental health occupational therapy. I am based out of Coimbatore in India, and currently I work as an occupational therapy with an edtech startup, which is basically into accessibility of special education and occupational therapy services for people across the globe. Today, we are going to be talking about culturally relevant OT models, creating solutions that work for India. And as Karthik sir rightly said, it is really a sort of complex topic, and I think a niche topic as well, because I believe that a lot of frameworks or interventions or current models that we use today in our country, at least even in our training or as a part of our curriculum, are very rooted in the Western frameworks. And these may not fully address the unique needs that the Indian population currently requires. So, the goal is that we will try to explore how we can integrate our Indian practices, respect the cultural dynamics of our community, and also develop innovative and inclusive approaches so that we are able to make OT more effective and accessible across the country. So let us share insights, challenges, and strategies that we can use to shape OT practice, which will align with India's cultural and social realities. And I'm looking forward to an engaging discussion with all of you.
All right. So, do you like, Nidhi, do you have a sort of a leading question that you want to put first to get us started on a particular direction?
Sure, sir. So we will start out with the question: what is it that we can do to make OT more culturally relevant in India? And of course, I'll request that Karthik sir can go first.
Right. All right. So, yeah, again, these are all perspectives. So I'm just kind of reflecting, back several years ago when I was practiced OT in India. Like I started off like, more of like I adapted the PEO model to begin with. So I thought like, okay, so again, the PEO model, how we apply in the Western world is literally different from the Indian context because of the cultural dynamics and the hierarchy of the society in itself. Like there are so many levels of socioeconomic status level hierarchy and the living style. Say for example, if I'm going to look at the environment, so for patient one, they might be using an open bathroom. For my patient two, they will live in an apartment with a different style of bathroom. And for patient three, they will live in a suburb with a big individual home. The restroom is kind of like located separated from the main home, like several yards away in the backyard or something like that. And also the architecturally, is it accessible, is it wide enough, or is a person with difficulty like a stroke or a person who is wheelchair bound can access it. Everything was like, again, it was not conceived in a way. And then like always we are a culture of intercultural, like sort of the interpersonal dependency, I would say. Like the Western world believes in independence, but the Indian society, in my view, believes in interdependence. So if there is a family member with some sort of a disability, the other family members are obligated, or like feel obligated to help the person. Like if they are having difficulty entering the bathroom, somebody is ready to lift them up and like take them in, rather than thinking of, okay, like are we putting down their self-esteem here, or like how can we make it like more easy for them so that they can handle this by themselves. They might have the ability, but these barriers are making it challenging, and every time somebody jump to help in because they feel very insecure, or they feel like bad about themselves for not helping a person with some sort of a challenge, right? So that is one thing. And again, a lot of interpersonal dynamics, cultural practices, there are certain way, like they want to follow certain hygiene practices and stuff like that. So they believe that if we allow a person with some disability or difficulty to do tasks or things or activities for themselves, uh, it is not up to the culturally expected standards sometimes. So they said, no, 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 like let me help you, like because they couldn't really like they tolerate that. So okay, if this person does it in a modified way, why can't we allow it? Just to simply put it, like using right hand versus left hand, in India, like obviously we have these things, right? For anything, the cleaning task and all, like hygiene tasks, then we use the left hand. Say for example, the left hand is affected and we are giving them as an OT, we are recommending a gadget and then say, okay, use it with your able hand and they do things for yourself. is the person, first of all, the patient itself comfortable according to their cultural norms, and then the family member, if the patient is okay, or the family members and surrounding people are okay with it. So, I mean, it's like, again, it is a different dynamics that we really need to carefully work. And I always felt like OTs in India should learn to work not only with the patient, when we talk about family centered care, it is very much relevant in India. So we need to bring them into the picture. We need to educate them. A lot of stakeholder and family member education needs to be done, and we need to identify solutions in collaborations with them. Then only it will work. If you take the patient alone and treat, or like focus on the patient's challenges and difficulties and stuff, it'll be very difficult. That's one of the lessons I learned. And again, looking at the other model, when I learned about the Kava model, I could relate that to the Indian. I mean, I think it's globally, like we can really apply that in any parts of the world. So that is another model that I think that we can apply to the Indian context to an extent, because it's more of a philosophical model. It is not really like prescribing anything in terms of intervention. So we can really like open to tap into other frames of references and approaches. But then this is kind of like giving you guidance in terms, so that I think can be applied to an extent. And this is too preliminary to reveal, but like for a long time I have conceived a model that nothing is on paper yet, but like I really like thought about I just want to call that model a rope model, which is like if you really think of like a thick rope with multiple strands in it, and how it's all integrated to form that rope. And the integrity and the strength of the rope is in the twinkling of it, like the strands are like tangled with each other and then like form. So I really think like, okay, if you're taking a long rope, and then the one end is going to be your birth, and the next end is going to be your death, and then like in between, like it's not one thing, it's your psychological self, your spiritual self, your physical abilities, everything. And then say for example, as days get older, then obviously the strength and the integrity of the rope gets weakened and weakened, or as it gets used much, it gets weakened. So similarly, we are tearing our our bodies, like we task them with so many things. We There are a lot of physical demands that we put on ourselves and stuff, like doing things. So as we get old, the strength of the rope weakens. As we do more things, again, the integrity and the strength of the rope loosens up a little bit. It loses its strength as the time goes by. And then say for example, if a sharp object touches the rope or a particular strand, one strand got broken, and that is also compromise the strength and integrity of the rope. Which means even in our case, like say for example, a patient is sustaining with an injury, like I'm really like the knife is kind of touching one of the strands, like similarly an injury happens to the person, that one strand is weakened, but it's going to affect the integrity of the rope itself. Right? So that then the physical aspect is going to influence other aspects as well. And similarly, like say sometimes some mental health issues, say if you really like what to say, unroll the rope a little bit and then loosen up the strands, it's going to affect its strength a little bit. So I think for the rope to be strong enough, or in another way, apply that philosophy to the life, like for a person to have a healthy life with good health, I would say healthy life again. So then all these needs to be like strong, and then like depends on each other, and then we need to maintain that interdependence to maintain the integrity of the rope. So as OTs, if there is a cut in the rope, then we need to patch it up, and then also like we need to make sure that we strengthen it so that the integrity of the rope maintains. And also we need to account for the aging piece of it. Definitely as the age progresses, it's going to loosen up it. So how are we going to support it? How are we going to minimize the demands on that rope as it gets older, sort of a thing. So this is sort of the thing that I've conceived, like it's been like sitting in my mind for years. I need to really like bring it out and like put together as a model. But again, this is an essence of what based on my observations from my practice in India a long time ago. So it's like I really like try to think and brainstorm and deliberate a lot internally to really think about, okay, so there are so many aspects. It's not like one aspect. If you touch one, it leads to other, it leads to other, it leads to other. So it's not like pretty straightforward application of OT process in my view. Well, we need to take in so many things into consideration. So I'll stop there to get to hear other perspectives. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. And the rope model that you spoke about definitely is something that is going to go a long way. I am sure and I'm very confident that's going to go a long way. Now, I'll ask Emma ma'am to share her perspectives on how we can make OT more culturally relevant. I am not sticking to the geographical location of India, but in general, how can we make OT more culturally relevant?
Oh, thank you for the invitation to share. I mean, it's not for me to say how we could make OT more culturally relevant in India, but I love that rope model as well. And I just, as you're describing the way the fibers are woven together, it reminds me of, woven carpets in the north or fishing nets in the south. And then I think of the women that I work with in India in really marginalized communities and their collective strength. And it's not just their ability to overcome occupational injustices alone, but like together, how when they weave together, they're so much stronger. So that please continue with that. How do we make OT more culturally relevant? It is, of course, a question here in Australia too, particularly working with Indigenous communities. I think listening is really, really important, and spending time with people to share ideas and knowledge and understand how different knowledges can intersect. And when we work at the interfaces of knowledges, I think it opens us up to stronger learning, collaboration, and adaptability. And I think from all of the OTs that I've met in India and all of the different clinics that I've visited and hospitals that I've visited, that flexibility and adaptability is really inspirational. And so, if you're out in a rural hospital and prescribing a wheelchair is just never going to be feasible in that village. So how do we get people after a stroke or an injury, up mobile is not something that we learn in our textbooks, right? And we all have the same textbooks. But, the adaptability of Indian OTs to actually be able to respond to individual families, but in the context of their own environments, I think will go a long way. I can talk more about occupational justice and some of the work that we've done to modify and contextualize OC justice for India, but I'm interested to know what other people have to say.
Sure, ma'am. Thank you so much for
Hi,
your
Ashwini.
inputs on this. So, yes, sir.
No, I said like welcome to the new participants. Like welcome Ashwini. Welcome. I saw a couple of more Pranjali, and we also have one person just joined, Madhavi. Yeah, welcome. So if you want to reiterate your question, Nidhi, so that others can also share the perspectives.
So we just got started with our discussion on the topic culturally relevant OT models. And the first question for deliberation was, how can we make OT more culturally relevant in India? I think the floor is open. Any of you can go next on what you would like to contribute to this question.
That's a nice opening, Nidhi. Thank you. I think there was something interesting about fishing nets, and I'm actually, I wish I had heard that part. It sounded really interesting. For context, it has been a long time since I practiced in India, but I'm glad that we are thinking and talking about this because a few other countries like Jordan, Oman, Singapore, they have been talking about that as well. So I'm glad we are joining that conversation. I think culture is so many things, right? But one thing that stands out for me at the moment is like beliefs in terms of independence. And when I worked in pediatrics in Calcutta, a lot of it was around independence because when we were training as OTs, it was about setting goals straight away. And I think this point about the point that Emma made just now about listening, I think as young graduates, as a student myself, I was probably too curious, not curious, actually, not curious about what was their goal, but it was about independence in feeding or independence in getting ready to go to school if for a pediatric client. But putting the curiosity hat on now, I think I do take that step back right now. When I'm speaking with a client, it's about, okay, this is what occupational therapy can do, but what do we want here in this context? So staying curious, staying open, that becomes really important because that is what is client-centered. And when we are client-centered, I think the piece around staying culturally responsive, culturally relevant comes in without too much deliberation. Those would be my initial thoughts.
Yes. We have Sri Ridhanya, Naveen, Kumar, Pranjali, Madhavi, and Shobana ma'am. Who would
Welcome.
like to go next?
Yeah, let's hear from like some OTs currently practicing OT in India. Like, I think that the people who have spoken so far are kind of like we have practiced in India, but not now. So I would like to hear, like some of the practitioners who are currently practicing OT in India, and then we can invite Shobana ma'am as well.
Sri
So
Ridhanya, would you
Ridhanya,
like to go
Madhavi,
next?
there's no right or wrong answer. Share your perspectives. Okay. Ridhanya, Naveen Kumar, Madhavi, anyone? Any volunteers? Please unmute yourself and go ahead.
Sorry, guys. Can you
Yeah,
hear
go
me?
ahead. Yes, yes.
All right. Okay. Sorry. I couldn't hear any of you. Sorry, I might missed
Oh,
something there. Sorry, I joined very late. My apologies. Um, good to see you, everybody there. Emma, hi, Emma. Hi, Ashwini, Karthik, and hello, everybody. It's good to see. Thank you so much for bringing this beautiful topic. Um, and was there any question related to me? Sorry, I missed it. Sorry, go ahead.
So
so
we just got
not a
started.
question per se. Yeah, go ahead, Nidhi, go ahead.
We just got started, and the question that we started deliberating upon was how can we make OT more culturally relevant in India?
Brilliant. Well, I think we are very at the very stepping stone at the moment. Though OT is in India been more than 50 years, and myself so so proud to say that I did have a part in the initial step, especially with working with Emma George in the contextualizing occupational justice health questionnaire in India. Sorry, there's somebody.
I muted
Yeah,
them.
so yeah, no worries. So I know that people now are looking more in contextualizing the cultural model towards Indian population. And I am so happy to share that I am one of the, like I'm a little part in this first initial step that has been, began in India. And I have to thank Emma George from Adelaide University and the Indian Public Health Institute who actually made to see the different perspective of occupational justice in Indian context. And I hope this will grow more, just not in one area, but in several aspects from how we look into the cultural context of occupation in India. and more to go.
Definitely. Yes, ma'am. The others, Sri Chaitanya, Naveen Kumar, Soundarya, who has just joined in, Madhavi, if you could please volunteer and share your views as well.
Silence. I don't know why. I thought like, yeah, this is a platform to exchange views and perspectives. If you have any thoughts or anything, don't worry about. There'll be no judgments here. Go ahead. All right, so let's move on to the next question, Nidhi.
Yes, sir. One thing that I wanted to add for this question, especially after Ashwini ma'am's thought on client-centered practice, was that moving from a medically oriented model to more of a social model is also going to definitely help us move more towards a client centered practice, which will help enable us to go further down into enabling us to practice culturally relevant therapy solutions.
Mm-hmm. True,
Moving on
true.
to the next question. How could we blend traditional approaches in contemporary practice?
Okay. Uh, I think like when we talk about traditional approaches, do you mean the traditional medicinal practices or healthcare practices in India, or are we talking about the approaches pertaining to the OT that we all learned? Like, just to like, look at this, because again, if you really look at the reason I asked that question is, if you look at China, for example, uh, they they have this 4-year rehab science type of program. So I do not know, now there may be OT schools, but like, so for a long time they have this 4-year rehab degree where they have OTPT, all the content embedded into that program is what I'm aware of. But then like when I looked at some of those curriculum and all, like for different purposes, I noticed that they blended the Chinese medicinal practices into the rehab. So there are courses about like, if you look at the OT curriculum courses, there's also like courses about Chinese medicine and then like how they integrate. And even I come across a couple of publications where there is a blend of the rehabilitation concepts, the concepts of like, the allopathic rehabilitation blended with some sort of their own, Chinese traditional medical practices. And I found that to be interesting. Again, it's been a while, so I couldn't really recollect what I read, but I could at least remember there is a blend of these things. But in India, if you really look at it, like, I think we have our own traditional Ayurvedic and Siddha oriented medical practices that we consider as alternative forms of medicine. But again, the one connecting dot that I could see across these things is like the belief system of the patient and their family. Right? I've seen patients trying allopathy, even for like conditions like diabetes, cancer, whatnot, right? Even for some of the conditions that affect brain and disability, that causing disability, still people like, they want some hope, they want something to get ameliorated. So basically what they do is like, first they go to the allopathic route of going to a consultant and then like getting referred to rehab professionals. But then they simultaneously have seen people trying different alternate methods of treatment. And I think it's more to do with the belief system, and whatever the guidance and the family, like there are a lot of influences in the Indian culture, right? Say for example, is it the patient who's taking the decision of where to go, what to get done? It's a big question, because I faced the barriers, because on one side, as a therapist with my scientific knowledge and background, I'm trying to educate the patient and their family, but there are so many influences that I do not even aware of, like, because like one week I'm telling them and they're like, okay, we can follow this approach, and then we'll just kind of monitor the progress in 4 weeks from now. The next week, like, out of a blue, they don't want therapy or they don't want to follow that approach, because some, again, I'm not blaming that influencer, but I'm telling they might have done with a good intention on their own right. But the problem is like there are so many influences, like the extended relatives, families, trustable friends, or some people whom they believe as knowledgeable, but in fact that person may not have adequate knowledge in this area, like related to healthcare. They might be a financial advisor from a family, that's fine, but how can they also be a advisor in general for everything? And they said, no, 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 don't do all these things, because they might have some experience down the road, which they not applying that in the same context. They're picking some insight they generated from somewhere, something else, and they're like trying to misplace it in this context. So that way they are influencing the patients and their family members decision to pursue one route of therapy. So I'm kind of really thinking, when we blend, yes, if there are like a positive elements from all these approaches, from Siddha, Ayurveda, allopathic medicine, rehab, and everything, and if it is going to really contribute to the welfare, of the patient, or the functional recovery of the patient, then I'm in it. Like, we really want to get good things from every approaches that we could, and then potentially, as long as it's not like one thing and then negatively influencing the other, we are going to adapt and blend. That's totally fine. But like sometimes, uh, again, I have heard, like, if you're taking this medicine, you should stop taking any other medicine. you know if you're doing this, just only do this, you don't have to do anything else, and you will see results in 6 months. So these kind of generalized view, and like, of course, it has to do with literacy level of the population. Like, if you see a patient with, who's more educated, living in an urban area, is going to different than a patient with limited education and overbearing influence of others on that patient in a rural or suburban context. It's going to be different. So I think that's what I, when I opened up this conversation today, I said, like, it's a very intricate topic that we need to unravel multiple layers. Sometimes I feel like, it is like really tangled so heavily that I'm unable to unravel, like, in order to make this straight, where to start. Like, it's all like, very complicated and intricate, but on that note, I also want to stay positive. Things are emerging, like, the literacy level is growing, the financial ability of a person to spend on healthcare is growing as well. So there are some positive things. And also for the OT side of things, I recently heard that there is close to 50 OT schools in India, which is definitely a milestone. Like, we have started as a profession long time ago, and for a long time, the profession was not that much visible, but now I see more and more schools popping up, and also in those states where we never had OT schools. So that's all a welcome development. So that is, on one side, people are start noticing OT services, and with the advent of technology, now all information is accessible to everyone. So there was a time once, we have no other source of information, but now there's multiple source of information that people can rely on, which means, like, if somebody is saying something as an advice to the family, or the patient can still have the autonomy now, just using their mobile device or laptop to just kind of go and Google up, and then, like, okay, wow, like, how is it? And now at least they have started deliberating instead of completely believing on that one-sided thought. So so yeah, I'm in favor of blending the traditional Indian practices, healthcare practices, with rehab and OT. At the same time, we need to really ensure that we balance it out, so that it doesn't affect the positive aspects that we bring to the table, but the other therapy or healthcare practice is kind of like contradictory. Thank you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes, sir. Thank you.
That's very interesting. Can I add more a little bit with that? That's
Sure.
very interesting question, first of all, and also Karthik, I cannot disagree with all the point that you just mentioned. And I was just reflecting back my practice as an OT throughout these years, and like the how we blend the traditional approaches with the contemporary practice. And I couldn't resist myself, like any approach, the Western approach that I use in my practice, like for example, the brain gym exercises, the reflex integration exercises, and the floor time. My practice is a lot to do with children. So when I approach, all these practice, I couldn't resist myself thinking back and reflecting back how it is rooted from the Indian traditions, like playing with children on the floor is been happening for, like I remember when I was a kid, like I used to play with my grandparents on the floor. And then, like it's always like, it's been the over the adult playing with children would come to the level of their children, face and they play. And now I see the theory's been built in the floor time, and it's been, um emerging very popular. And I was thinking like, well, this has been done so back in India. And like same as reflex integration, like when I do integrate those reflexes, and I remember that my grandmother and great grandmothers were as passed down the baby massage when they do, as soon as the infant is born. And these were all reflex integrative approaches that they've been doing it. And I was thinking, like, where do we actually, why we weren't practicing all that, where we were lacking in it, or are we not doing much research on our traditional approaches? So, like we learn the brain exercises where I could still reflect that on the basic yoga poses given in the brain gym, which is like, right, okay, this has already been like taught when I was a kid, and by maybe from a neighbor, uncle or auntie, like who just kind of, oh, we have a yoga class, pop in and we do that. And the visual perceptual exercises in yoga, and all that is now being delivered as certified courses, and you need to get the license to practice, and you have to have the license to approach, to use the approach. And I'm like, I think like, probably we lost a lot of our identity by not engaging ourselves in keeping those traditional approaches and values, integrating them in the clinical practice, or even to, like, to do the research on that. Do you know what I mean? Like, so it's I mean, like, I think it is probably the right time to look back in our traditional approaches and how to blend that with the practice, and what should we do for that. I mean, like, if we all join together, we could actually do a lot, which, like research is one thing that keep coming in my mind, but there may be so many things that people would have in their minds, and like we need to collaborate to get that done. Yeah, that's my view. And that's a very interesting question. Thank you.
Thank you,
Yeah, I
Shobna.
did. Just to respond, I couldn't agree more with whatever that you said. Like, and obviously, I also like thought about it a lot of times. Like whatever that we did, in the SI room or in the OT clinics, I see like, okay, this has been like they have been done like for decade, or like for years, for generations, I would say, in different form. And I thought like some of our grandmothers are actually OTs, but they didn't really have that education, or didn't like call themselves as OT, but like they have done a lot of things, especially when it comes to childcare and the first few years of a baby's life, a grandmother's influence in those days. Like again, they all like just kind of like everybody, like it kind of passed on to generations and been practiced. But then I think there was a point in time the societies, the makeup started changing. People are like moving out of the traditional family system and stuff, and started living alone, and some sort of a lack of guidance kind of pops up. And then also they get confused, bombarded with so many information, and sometimes, as you rightly said, we fail to recognize the value and the importance behind some of our traditional practices. But again, when I first put together, like learned from Nidhi about like this topic, can we do it, and like the first thing I thought, like one thing is adapting some of these Western approaches to India. On the other side, we need to also like generate new models pertaining to the Indian context. And that's where this point can blend in, where we can also revisit some of these practices and then embrace them, and then like see how we can wrap around and develop a culturally relevant model for OT practice in India. Thank you.
I'd like to come in here, Nidhi. So, so there is a person that I know who was diagnosed with Parkinson's, and he is now retired, and he was working in the States, and he's now back in India, living with his family. And right now he is accessing Ayurveda. So he's having a lot of potions, and he's having all of those massages that go with the system of Ayurveda. But he's also accessing physiotherapy, and because it's somebody I know really well, I also know that an occupational therapist known to the physio comes in once in a while. But what is happening is that, so when we're looking at culturally relevant here, so this is an 80-year-old who's lived a good part of his life outside of India, and who is used to maybe living a certain way, but and who's also used to communication about him. So he is being communicated about by different professionals, but with him being the center of the conversation, like about me, with me, that kind of a conversation. That's what he's used to. So I think the problem he's having right now is that all these people are talking, they're talking to me, they're tweeting me, but I've said, look, why don't I organize that you all come together and talk about me? But that is not happening. So that would make my life much more easier and less stressful. So that is also, so being culturally responsive here is about this interdisciplinary collaboration in the interest of the client, in the interest of the patient's well-being, right? So I think the other point here is that, so there is a traditional approach being used with this gentleman, but there are also other approaches being used. How can they be fused? They can only be fused if there is a willingness on all parties to come together. Um, yeah, so I think it's learning the hard way, this in this context.
Yeah, again, I'm reflecting back on my early days of OT practice in India. The same struggle that I really experienced. Like I'm ready to reach out and collaborate with others and trying to tell them what OT is about, seeking referrals and stuff. But that is also like if you really, that is also like culturally little embedded here. Like people see that primary consultant as the torchbearer or the guiding person. Like whatever he or she says, they will just kind of blindly follow. If that person says don't go to OT or don't go to PT or don't go to any other service, then they won't go. And if that person says you should go this, they will go. And those people say do not practice that. Oh, they will all tell something like if you want to do and all, like I cannot, like you find some other consultant. They threaten sometimes. I've seen consultants doing that to the patients. If the patient want to like deliberate with them, they just kind of like shut them down at the very first step and then say, I will tell you when to do what to do. You just follow, like follow this thing. And so it's some sort of a like a authoritative approach. And I don't know, like there are so many aspects to it. One thing is like like trying to from a marketing side of things, they don't want to lose their clients. On the other side, they just want to like maintain that perception that like I know everything attitude. There are so many things, but I think we need to start from the OT school, medical school. From that point itself, we need to now teach them about the value of interprofessional collaborations. There should be interprofessional education that's happening in the school level to mitigate this issue, because once they are kind of like developed that way. But again, I've seen even like medical professionals kind of devaluing each other. It's not about one professional devaluing or demoralizing others. I've seen like a conflict between specialists in a particular field itself. And it was all like kind of like sometimes they go through some of these challenges, and once they gain that authority and like come to that level, then they started exerting that same authority. So I just wondered, like I'm just kind of like those days I've really like deliberated a lot, and then like tried to navigate this complex landscape as an emerging OT to stabilize OT in a couple of settings that I'm involved with. So it was challenging, and rightly said, I do not know whether things have improved or not by now. And then with the, as I said, like now that we have more access to information technology, and again on the same note, I've also come across people even back then and even now. I see more and more, pediatricians, neurologists, psychiatrists, and all, like they are ready to now embrace and support OT as well on the other side. So I think it's a lot to do with we individual people. Not we cannot label as a profession, but I really see that attitude is permeating. And this culture of, like, the patient blindly believing that one person, and then just simply follow, even sometimes to their disadvantage, but that person might get mad or upset if I do these things, so I don't want to do. So that kind of authoritative influence is something that needs to be definitely changed. But that the interprofessional collaboration, I think if we start from the school days itself, by the time they graduate, they know the value of each other, and then they also know the value of being together, and then like serve the clients. Thank you. I see a couple of hands. Go ahead.
Yeah, I
Hello, sir.
do.
Uh, am
Sorry.
I audible?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm sorry, my internet is very slow, so I'm not on video. But I actually agree with what Karthik sir said about how different professionals interact in India. Because one of the things that I have noticed with people who follow traditional methods and models, to the point where it is very difficult to tell the difference between a OT and a PT. The thing that they have told me is that it works. They do it because it works. Because only if they follow something similar to PTs are they seen as medical professionals. That is only when they are able to communicate with other professionals. And the core OT stuff that they think they should be doing, but they are not, like just feeding intervention, for example. Those, I mean, this is my friend's view, but those are seen as things that people should be able to figure out themselves. So a lot of professionals do not consider it to be part of healthcare, but rather as something that the patients should be able to do themselves without help. And I don't know how to, I agree with their thoughts, but I just don't know how to overcome that. And I also somehow feel that uh, that's all.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for sharing your perspective.
Right. Yeah. I mean, like I do see that the various perspective of people sharing things like the hierarchy in India is very challenging, and I would like to add that I don't see that just happening only in India. To be honest, like we are all, like practicing in various parts of the world, and we do actually have those challenges if we could reflect back on our the way that we've been, maybe the levels might change, but there is challenge in the like in integrating your approaches in with the family members approval, like for example, like to have the family centered practice or the client centered practice. It isn't that easy, like it reflects on the paper. In the paper, whatever, like say for example, you need to include the family, need to include the client from the very base, like a co-production should be happen, it is all been well described in the paper, but is it really happening? And I would say that maybe it isn't in, at least in all the areas. Like, for example, again, like I need to come back to my own practice as pediatric occupational therapist, both in Ireland and in India. Like I do experience the challenges of implementing those family centered and client centered practice due to a lot of policies and guidelines, and the hierarchical approval of what you want to do. You couldn't because the guideline isn't supporting, or like, and you feel the frustration. You do come across at one stage like, right, okay, so until this is going to have a change. You cannot actually bring that in practice effectively. I wouldn't say that it is not happening, it is happening, but the levels, like in India, maybe like as Karthik mentioned, that a consultant or a neurologist say that this is what I prescribe for your child, you stick with this plan and nothing more. Most of the Indian parents would just follow, or the clients would just follow, but things are changing, thanks to social media, and there's a lot of accessible tools in the social media. However, it has both a positive and negative, of getting information from online. However, like things are changing, but I don't see that only that's happening only in India. I don't agree with that. I see that it's happening everywhere, and I really would like to hear from people elsewhere to share their opinion on this. Thank you.
So Dr. George, like in Australia, like is it like a similar hierarchical model of care, or is it like a little different based on your observation?
Yes, in some settings, certainly in the government health systems, there would still be sort of similar hierarchies of care. But there is a emerging priority for interprofessional practice. And so that's certainly a priority within our education systems as well, to make sure that we train up allied health clinicians to be able to work really well with each other and understand each other's roles. Certainly a priority in my school. But I think there's also a lot of OTs in Australia that are working in occupational ways, but might not have the title of occupational therapist, and that is more difficult for them. And they're doing really important work in community development, in health promotion, in schools, in community centres, and still registered as occupational therapists, but might have a different job title. And so that can be challenging too, in terms of just status and advocacy for the profession and the value of what we do. So I think there might be some similarities there with the examples shared, and some of the frustrations of how do we make sure that we advocate for our profession and ultimately for our clients, about the value of occupation.
Thank you. Yeah, talking about this is, I'm just kind of like shifting gears here, but talking about the culturally relevant practice there, and I think the cultural beliefs and attitudes and the ingrained values. Say, for instance, I always wondered why like pediatric OT is like sort of a notable practice area. Pediatrics is sort of a notable practice area for OT in India and not others. And if you really just kind of unravel a little bit, people value their children in the sense like they value investing money and efforts on their children. On the same In the same family, you might see an elderly person with some sort of a disability or dementia or some other condition, and that person could very well benefit from OT, but they say like, oh, she already lived her life or lived his life. Why? That is the power of culture, right? So there is an OT coming for one of the family members, and there is another family member who could also benefit from OT. That service is like very much accessible. And if a consultant says, yeah, I could really like do these type of things, and I can really have a separate session with that client, and the family is obviously thinking, okay, where I need to put my money, because where they put the value, right? And also the culture strongly, throughout India, I believe, asserted that the younger generation's responsibility is to take care of the olders, right? I mean, it's a powerful thing, sort of a social security system in India, in my view. I grew up and I strongly believe in that. That's totally fine. But how it affects the geriatric practice area, like a lot of OTs, like I think like my last survey in 2018 said like only 1% of the OTs. Now the situation may be different. And also like my survey sample was very less, so I don't want to like completely rely on that finding. But anyway, whatever the finding we have says only 1% of OTs working in geriatric practice area. And this is, in my view, because of the cultural impact and the influence that that we have in India, in my view. See, yes, we need to the family members are responsible, and I like that system. I'm with it. At the same time, I think, simply the family members cannot do everything to the elderly person to ensure adequate quality of life. If they really value and respect their elders, they really need to, again, that's my 2 cents. It's my personal opinion that I'm sharing now. My perspective is that they need to, provide these services to ensure their autonomy, self-esteem, functional independence. And that's a way to show respect and caring to their elders, rather than, like, simply providing them a place and, like, food, and then they say, okay, yeah, you're right. On that same note, with nowadays I see a lot of old age homes being popping up, similar to the assisted living facilities in the Western world. I think there are some, but it's a different model. It'll be like one big campus with, like, separate apartments or homes for elders, and then, like, be one central building with the nursing and medical care 24 hours available, and some, gym is being there, and there's a park for them to walk and enjoy healthy air and healthy walk. So I think that model is popping up, but it is a high time that we kind of interface with those stakeholders and then, like, make OT's presence in there. So at least in those type of settings, that we also, like, providing services to the people who are 65 and above. Thank you.
I see Suresh sir has raised his hand. Suresh sir, would you like to go next?
Yeah,
Welcome,
thanks,
Suresh.
Nidhi. Yeah, Karthik, sorry, I joined late because of some technical issues in the system.
Yeah.
The aspect that I wanted to stress was the culture of the service provision system rather than the culture of the service users. And I always keep saying in all our Saturday night chat, one is the start point is the way we teach the students about how to provide occupational therapy service. We stick to pediatrics, and that's why most of the people who graduate as occupational therapists, they want to actually go and then do things in pediatrics. Similarly, if you look the culture outside the occupational therapy service provision system, again, because it's children, they are tomorrow's resources. So they are looked at as something that's very important, and despite the system, even if it's not available, as a parent, I would actually try and see what can I do. And nowadays the medical professionals are now really aware that occupational therapists can help children with disabilities in an Indian context. So if a child or a parent takes a child to the doctor says you should refer to an OT, and then they somehow find an occupational therapist. This doesn't happen in a stroke unit. So in the stroke unit, the predominant word is, okay, you're stabilized, get some physio, finished. And then people believe that, okay, if they get some physio, then they'll be all right. They don't understand what OT can do in a stroke. And the other situation is, even if people do master degrees in neurology or we have several master degrees in India other than pediatrics alone. They are just working as teachers in occupational therapy schools. They are not working in, say, a multidisciplinary adult neuro rehab setting, because you don't have a setting at all in most of the tertiary care hospitals also. And this becomes important for us to be taught when we are students learning as an occupational therapy student in any program, both graduate as well as postgraduate courses. And also the teachers need to be built with this capacity of trying to tell what we do, and the science of occupational therapy within the profession. They're all focused on the clinical bits which can actually make people believe that they know loads of things in what's happening. Say, for example, if an occupational therapist talks to somebody about sensory integration or neurological blocks and developmental blocks, the parents would like to hear more about that. But if you say, this is nothing to worry, you have to do it at home, I can teach you some home program, I can come to the home, and they're not interested in these kinds of advices. And so the culture is trying to ensure that I am one of the good therapists in the system, and because there's no system here, I can do whatever I want, and then whatever I should be doing as an OT outside India, it's also not taught to me. So these are some of the dimensions that we should actually look at in terms of building the capacity to understand what is OT science. And then even the academicians should teach students what we can do rather than just treating somebody with a focus on impairments. We are somebody who can do or deliver more than that.
I certainly agree with your perspective, and I always felt that how many entry-level OTs or graduating out now from the programs are confident enough to talk to the other professionals about what OT is, right? Like they should do they have the competency and the courage, and they say, if neurologist is an expert in neurology, we are an expert in occupational therapy, right? Like you have, like if you have your master's degree, you have spent like good 5 to 7 years of your lifetime learning the science and applying these things. So my point is, again, that's a thing that we all grew up in that culture, and then that the hierarchy automatically comes to us, and then like we're trying to be very timid, very polite, we very submissive, and so we don't really try to be even like, my point is like, yeah, respect everyone, respect each other, that's all. That is very good, and that's how it should be. Yes, I'm very respectful for other professionals, but at the same time I need to tell what OT is, because they do not know, they didn't really learn about all those OT knowledge base. I have this knowledge base, and they, of course, I do not have some of the knowledge base they have, and I respect that. So I think that kind of an attitude and culture should emerge, and we need to empower our students during the time of training to really pitch in what OT is, and they should also, like, we should develop their public speaking skills and like speaking ability. Like we need to work on those competencies so they go out there as entry level therapists, tell what OT is to different stakeholders. They don't feel shy or timid or insecure to talk to either consultants or patient families. So we need to empower those things. That's one other thing. And again, we are already hitting that 1 hour mark from the time we started. One thing that I want to just plant the seeds here is to think about as well, talking about the cultural relevance, cultural relevant OT practice in India. Like I believe that we, like, based on the history of India and its journey, I believe we are a society that like try to accept a lot of things. We are trying to be very tolerant with so many things, right? So for example, a difficulty that is being reported in the Western world and being treated in the OT sector will not even be seen as a burden or a difficulty in the Indian context, to put it in a very simple terms. Like they try to endure it, they try to tolerate it, they try to accept it, they try to learn with the difficulties and disabilities or challenges, rather than trying to remediate it, even though there may be options available. I think like sometimes they are just kind of like their mind block sort of a thing, that attitude. I think it's also like part of the cultural influence. So there is, again, culture has a very strong impact, and so much of it is not very visible, and that is also another problem, right? We need to really unravel all these things to pinpoint what is that factor, and then we can start addressing. I think the scholarly community in the OT should really think about unraveling these cultural nuances that influencing practice, and then take initiatives so that at least, again, it is not going to happen tomorrow, but I think we should sow the seeds now, so that these cultural attitudes and perceptions change over time. And of course the effort should be on multiple fronts, educating OTs to educating stakeholders on multiple things. And with, again, society is going to also undergoing change every single day with with advent of technology, now with generative AI, and so many things are becoming more accessible to people, and people are feeling a little bit more empowered and knowledgeable nowadays. So I think the societal change and then our efforts will eventually make a big cultural shift. And then also, one thing I'm very positive about is um, the future of OT India is very, it looks very positive in my view, because the lifestyle, all the other things have started changing, which actually all will only like increase the demand for OT services, and we need to be ready to serve. Otherwise some other profession or some other title will come and take over, and then like do what we do and then call that as their services. Yeah, and I see Suresh's hand. Suresh, I will just gonna hear from you, and then any final thoughts from anyone, and then I will ask Nidhi to wrap it up, because already we are little past the
Sure,
time.
sure.
Go ahead, Suresh.
just one final thought that we should think about, which I forgot to mention, and probably that could be another a topic for another SNC, is the leadership itself. The culture of the leadership also matters a lot, because see, when I joined occupational therapy, I heard somebody as a president of the association, and then there were loads of things that was in my mind after I graduated, and this person was there for 2 decades after my graduation as well as the president. So uh, the leadership needs to actually improve in terms of teaching the students, or helping the students understand what models are there, what evidence are there for the context that we are talking about. And we have 36 states, and then each state has got different dialect, different culture, different ways of the health systems working, and different resources altogether. But we are not told anything about that even now. So nobody knows what happens. Even in this recent meeting where the new president was talking about the National Council for Allied Health Professionals, he was saying the national council will take over the state councils, and then the council will be actually running what has to be done by an occupational therapist and all allied health professionals, 52 in number in terms of the disciplines that they've taken. The question from me was, who selects the person who's going to work as an OT, a council member in the state? He said that we don't have any say in it. IOTA does not have any say in deciding who should be the OT representative within the state or the national council. And then he says, they are the people, so please register in the link that they have given as an occupational therapist. So there's no link between what the national body is actually doing with something that has come up recently, and then it's the government-led central and the state government bodies, and everybody is actually confused in terms of where are we, why should we get IOTA registration if we are not going to be supported by IOTA for anything that we are going to actually do for the state or for the pan country level. So I think probably in the next SNC we should actually look at the way forward with current culture and current context of the system also. Thank you.
Got it. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that views. All right. So, any final thoughts from anyone regarding this discussion? All right, Nidhi, time for you to wrap it up.
Before I wrap up, a few things that were on top of my mind. Um,
Sure.
we all spoke about having a family, a strong family approach where there is this cultural expectation that caregivers should be taking care of the people who are diseased or disabled. But there is also this question of a caregiver burden, which is often silent and ignored in the country. So, from a mental health perspective and from a physical health perspective, I think we should also make caregivers aware that whatever they are experiencing, they may not know that this is because, as a result of their caregiving duties, that they are experiencing these things at their personal level. So, helping them understand that as a result of their caregiving, their lives are also being impacted, and how, if they enable the individual to be independent, they are going to be relieved of a lot of things, will help reduce the caregiver burden, is one thing that I was thinking about. Another thing that Shobna ma'am was talking about was the incorporation of traditional approaches. I remember one of my batchmates had conducted a study on using palanguri, the traditional game of palanguri, in children with learning disabilities. And what she found out, unfortunately, she hasn't published her study, but what she found out was that it was more effective than using an abacus method. So definitely using a
Okay.
lot of traditional games and other approaches. For example, if we look at the art of putting kolam or rangoli, that itself is such a beautiful art of developing fine motor skills. So if you are able to incorporate such activities also as a part of our treatment approach, it's going to be more interesting for the patient rather than asking them to just randomly do a drawing or a painting. Another thing that I was thinking about is that it is considered that yoga and meditation took their birth in India. So rather than moving towards a model where we speak about using mindfulness based approaches or something like that sort, if we are able to develop evidence that meditation can be incorporated as a part of contemporary therapy and rehabilitation, we can definitely use that as well as a part of our practice. And to just wrap up, I would also want to say that helping grassroots level workers be aware of what we do as professionals is going to enable them to let people know how they can approach us. When I went to remote places of India, which I got to be a which I got to be a part of as a part of my training, I understood that these people in the rural community, they would believe the grassroots level ASHA workers more than the physician or nurse in a tertiary care center. So if the ASHA worker was telling them that this is good for you, do this, do that, or go to this person, go to that person, they would trust on them because that ASHA worker is a part of their community. So their belief in that worker is much greater and higher. So if we are able to help these grassroots level workers also understand how we enable patients or how we can help patients, then they will be able to spread that awareness among the community that they work with, and then the community will be able to largely benefit from the services that we've got to offer. So that was
Excellent
my
points. Excellent points. Good, good, very good. And I encourage your friend to publish that Palagwali study. It's very interesting, and it'll be very impactful as well. Very nice, very nice. All right. So, shall we wrap it up, Nidhi? All good?
definitely,
Yeah, all
definitely.
right. So once again, thank you so much, everyone. We had a great discussion. Of course, it's like I believe we started off on this topic. There is more to discuss. Maybe like sometime in the future, we will just have a subsequent session on a similar topic or on this topic itself. So I really appreciate all of you, especially Emma, George, for like, of course, it's very late in Australia, and thank you for joining us and sharing your perspective as well. The recording will be available soon on our IOTTT YouTube channel. Thank you and have a great rest of your evening, day, wherever you are. Take care.
Thank you so much.
Bye bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye bye. Good night.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Nidhi.
everyone. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
I'm going to end the meeting for all.